very welcome today to Merrion Square. My name is Dr. Ciara Kelly and I am here on behalf of Dublin City Council to welcome you to what is part of the National Remembrance Day for COVID-19, where local authorities throughout the country are marking today as a very special day where we remember those some 6,000 people that we did lose over the last 2 years to COVID-19, but also to honour those people that I often think it's a bit like 9/11 when people were running away from the Twin Towers as they fell. Some people were running into them to help. And that is what our frontline workers did during the pandemic. We are delighted to see members of the Dublin Fire Brigade and the Civil Defence here today, but we will be honouring all frontline workers for the work that they did in helping and in serving their communities. And to open today's event, I would like to introduce you to Dublin's Lord Mayor, Alison Gilliland.
Thank you, Ciara, and good afternoon and welcome to everybody to this very special Dublin City marking of our National Day of Commemoration to those lost to COVID and those who served during COVID. Today is a testament to the importance we as a nation, a society and a city place on remembrance of those nearest and dearest to us who are no longer with us, and of those who serve most in times of most need. The importance we place on honouring and paying tribute. While a solemn occasion, today is also a celebratory occasion. Little did any of us know the terrible worldwide impact that an unknown virus, COVID-19, that first surfaced in a Chinese food market in late December 2019, would have. A few months later, on Saturday the 29th of February 2020, our National Public Health team confirmed our first case of coronavirus. Throughout March 2020, we shut schools, childcare facilities, cultural and hospitality venues. We cancelled large gatherings, including our St. Patrick's Day parades, culminating on the 27th of March with a banning of all non-essential travel and contact with others. We were to keep apart, to keep safe. COVID infection numbers, including the numbers of deaths from the virus and briefings from the NPHET team, became a daily information staple as we all tried our best to adapt to a new and uncertain world. Where possible, work, including teaching and learning, retail provision, business meetings, medical consults, all pivoted to online platforms and virtual interactions, while thousands in person-facing roles such as hospitality, arts, culture and recreation had their jobs suspended and faced an uncertain employment future. Many, particularly women, valiantly juggled work, homeschooling, child and elder care, and generally keeping the show on the road amidst the various restrictions and public health precautions. We launched a national community call to harness the dynamic of local volunteers to support local communities. Here in Dublin, this was effectively and efficiently managed by our Dublin City Council, who coordinated practical supports, including shopping, medicine and fuel deliveries, and looking after other general daily life necessities. We commend you and thank you for your agile and responsive supports. While I am conscious that COVID-19 is still part of our lives, it is much more manageable, particularly thanks to an effective vaccination programme. And while the dark cloud of war in Ukraine hangs over us, we are now successfully emerging from 2 years of significant public health measures, 2 years of significant numbers of lost loved ones, significant sacrifices made by young, old, and everyone in between, and the significant service by frontline health, hospital, and emergency service workers, and those who serve the public in a broad range of essential areas, including education, food production and provision, local authority services, transport services, and civil defence. Absolutely no one's life was untouched by this global pandemic. And today offers us a space and an occasion to reflect on this period of our lives, personally, at a local community level, at a national level, and indeed at a global level. As we reflect, let us remember all those who lost their lives to this terrible virus, leaving their loved ones behind, heartbroken and in pain, not being able to be with them in their last moments. Too often, not being able to grieve together as a family, as a community, and too often not able to share that grief and console each other in the ways we normally would, at our wakes and funeral services. So important for the easing of pain and the celebration and closure of the circle of life. Let us also remember those who continue to live with the effects of COVID as they suffer the impact of long COVID. We also today remember and commend our committed, professional, caring, frontline health, hospital and emergency service workers who literally put their own lives and personal well-being on the line, transporting, diagnosing, treating and caring for those with COVID, as our hospitals, healthcare settings and ambulance services became so crucially central to effectively managing the pandemic. They donned PPE gear on a daily basis and without question or complaint stepped up to the mark and served us. For fear of contagion, as a precaution, many forewent hugs and comfort from their own children and loved ones when at home on the rare off-duty moments. Given the high level of healthcare and hospital workers who leave their families to come to work in Ireland from abroad, many others endured almost 2 years of remote communication with loved ones. We think of the losses, concerns and loneliness they suffered far from home. I particularly want to acknowledge our nurses who caringly held the hands of those taking their last struggling breaths, ensuring that they did not die alone, a major source of solace for their families and a testament to our nurses' exceptional human nature. As part of our reflection, we must not forget the lessons learned and the debts outstanding. While we recognise the incredible resilience and responsiveness of our health and caring services, we also recognise now glaring deficiencies in our mental health services, our disability services, our early intervention services, our child and elder care services, and challenges with resources, recruitment and retention in them. While we recognise that our national leaders, supported by NPHET, made informed decisions based on health rationale and evidence, we also recognise that a more gender balanced lens and women's voices were sometimes missing. While workers across all sectors put their shoulders to the wheel, we recognise that in some essential sectors, the impact of low wages and lack of sick pay was exposed. While we effectively and efficiently rolled out a national vaccination programme, one that now underpins our national COVID recovery plan, we recognise the massive global inequalities in health protections and vaccines provision, and are minded that no one is safe until we are all safe, such is our interdependence in this world. So today, let us take our memories and the spirit of our loved ones forward. Let us take our resilience and determination forward, our successes and learnings forward, and build back better, build back stronger, build back a more sustainable, equitable society. Let us together, for each other and for our collective future. Thank you. I'd like to now ask you all just to take a moment to think and to reflect of all those who have died, all those who served us, and all those who continue to live with COVID. Thank you.
And thank you very much for that very moving speech to the Lord Mayor of Dublin, Alison Gilliland. And thank you to you all for coming. If anyone has just arrived, you have joined the commemoration ceremony on behalf of Dublin City Council for National Remembrance Day for COVID-19. And you're all very welcome, as are the councillors that we see here today. And indeed the CEO, Owen Keegan. We're very glad to see you all here. And we're very lucky with this beautiful backdrop of Merrion Square to mark today's events here. The centrepiece of this short ceremony today is a beautiful poem, and I'm going to be joined now by Paula Meehan, who wrote the poem, The Light Returning, and Theo Dorgan, who is going to do the Irish translation of the poem on Solas Ag Fila. This was a poem written during the darkest days of COVID, and it is about drawing comfort from, I suppose, our natural environment, and indeed drawing hope and resilience as we move away from restrictions and into spring on the light returning. And I've been chatting to both Paula and to Theo beforehand, and they lived for a decade here on Merrion Square in this house right over here, and I think are delighted to recite the poem in front of their home. I'll give you over now to Paula and to Theo.
Lord Mayor, thank you for those comforting words. Distinguished councillors of the city, guests, visitors to Dublin, and fellow Dublin citizens, it's such a privilege for me to stand here and to bring this short poem. I wrote it as a poem of gratitude for surviving these last 2 years. I think, like most people here and globally, we swung from grief to gratitude, grief to gratitude, grief to gratitude on a daily basis. Grief for what we were losing, but gratitude for the immense kindness and dedication of family, of neighbours, and of our caring services. And I'm very, very honoured to stand here with the Dublin Fire Brigade and other representatives of people who went into the trenches in the early days of the pandemic before we had any protection. I also want to mark the fact that of new life. My niece, Hazel Doyle, is across in Holles Street, and she's just given birth to twin girls, Millie and Gracie. So her pregnancy was a crisis pregnancy, and the support and care she got from the nursing profession and our doctors has been phenomenal. So it's against that backdrop I read this poem, The Light Returning. Breath by breath, we take the cosmos in, pulse by pulse, drumbeat of the heart. The geese flock north, again the swallows come. Every plant that flowers, the promise of its seed. Lit by sun, lit by moon, lit by stars, breath by breath, our inner light let shine. Hand on heart, kin, kindred, kind, mortal in earthrise, radiant, diamond mind.
Well, I'm Dorgan and Himmer Fiadh le gach focal is in North and Third of Era, and I was particularly touched and moved by the sensitivity of the Lord Mayor's remembrance of all those who came from so far away and joined themselves with our caring services to keep as many of our beloved friends, relatives and neighbours alive as possible. That was an enormous sacrifice, and I think it speaks very well to the new Ireland, the Ireland that has opened its heart again to our visitors from the Ukraine. And I'm very struck, as I'm sure everybody here is, by the way in which the caring services, the fire brigades, the ambulances, the doctors and nurses have stepped forward to care for their fellow citizens in the Ukraine. And I think it's something we should all think of today. Is more on an order Astrachan of Erdogan Untach Paula, It's a great honour to be asked to translate such a beautiful poem. And today, as the light returns, especially as the light returns, on Solas ag Fille, an oil, glachamid an cosmos isteach, cuisle chuisle, búla drumme an chrí, na géine ó huig, na fáin leoga chuing a ríist, gach plánda faoi bhlá, gealtanas a híl, Sailtethe ag grian, ag gealach, ag réaltaí, an oil, ar solas leistigh ag lunra, lámh chrí, winter, ghaelte, cinne, déine in airí crinne, inatan geal diamant. Magah.
And thank you very much to Paula, Meehan and Theo Dorgan. And we're very lucky to have two poets here today of international renown. And thank you so much. That was really very beautiful. You see the Dublin Fire Brigade are here today. And interestingly, before we started, I was chatting to the Chief Fire Officer, Dennis Keeley. And while I was chatting to him, a woman came over who was here, probably is still here somewhere. And she said, "We don't thank you enough. You are legends." And I think that is absolutely true. And that is why we aren't just here, although it is so important to remember those we have lost to COVID-19 today. It is so important to honour the work that those frontline workers, ambulance men, fire service, those nurses, those healthcare workers, doctors, everyone who worked on the front line and put their lives at risk. We know that one of the largest groups that did pass away globally was frontline workers during the pandemic, because they did put their lives in our hands to help us and to serve us. And the DFB, in fairness to them, they serve us 365 days a year, very bravely, going out, rescuing us and picking us up when we need them most. And we are delighted to honour them and all frontline workers here today. And I am delighted to welcome to the stage the Chief Fire Officer of the Dublin Fire Brigade, Dennis Keeley.
Lord Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished councillors, colleagues, as the Chief Fire Officer in Dublin Fire Brigade, I'd like to thank the organisers of this wonderful event for inviting Dublin Fire Brigade to participate, and for myself to have the opportunity to say a few words. In over 2 years since our first recorded case of COVID-19, our public services and staff have been tested as never before. In the most tragic and far too often the worst of times for so many, the best of public service, humanity and community spirit has been demonstrated. I know the extraordinary efforts that all our staff and volunteers made to deliver our service and provide support for the community in ever-changing circumstances, and all while dealing with their own personal pressures and anxieties. My thoughts are with those who have been impacted by the virus, either directly or indirectly, especially to those who have suffered bereavement, and to those who are sick, to whom I extend my heartfelt wishes for a full recovery. During the pandemic, our country suffered a significant number of deaths, over 6,500 on this island alone. Families bereaved, businesses closed or impacted, lives and our plans put on hold. Thankfully, we are seeing things improve and our society is returning to normality. And today, we take the opportunity to pause and reflect on what we have endured as a community. Today is an opportunity to think about what has just happened. On today's Day of Remembrance, it is important to recognise the sustained efforts and commitment shown by all the public, by our volunteers, and of course by our own staff. And I particularly acknowledge the efforts of all those on the front line, including my own colleagues in Dublin Fire Brigade. From day one, all sections of the council have had and seen rapid deployment of staff, new ways of working, increased use and leverage of ICT equipment, And this has kept and helped to keep our essential services operating and allowed for continued operational service delivery and included, where required, working from home. These are exceptional changes in how people worked and lived. Since its inception in 1862, Dublin Fire Brigade has had a proud tradition of providing excellent service to the community. And as Chief Fire Officer, I am proud of the commitment shown by all those involved in delivering the quality service, despite the challenges presented through this pandemic. Throughout the Council, it is recognised that our greatest asset is our workforce. And I wish to acknowledge the dedication, hard work and professionalism from all our staff, without which we could not have provided those services. The commitment was never more evident than in the last 2 years, when our colleagues and staff operating, unaware of the challenges that lay ahead or the journey they would be required to take. And I recognise the sustained efforts, personal sacrifices and commitment shown by all staff. While COVID-19 has posed huge challenges, there have been opportunities. Collaboration across departments of the Council and with partner agencies has seen new relationships forged and strengthened. Different ways of doing things were discovered. An example of this collaboration was seen when Dublin's Rotunda Hospital, with whom Dublin Fire Brigade have a long history of working together, provided effective rapid testing arrangements for our staff, just ensuring that effective diagnosis, treatment and return to work of those much needed staff were maximised. I have been inspired by the surge and sustained efforts of our voluntary sectors, including our own civil defence, who continue to work tirelessly to support the community. These volunteers, both formal and informal, provided so much support and stepped up to the plate when needed, giving so freely of their time and resulting in so many beneficial outcomes for the community. As part of that response to COVID-19, DCC established its COVID-19 Community Call Forum, and that forum and collaboration with state agencies, communities and voluntary groups provided support and services to many vulnerable persons. Growing up in Dublin and serving the city and county as a firefighter and officer, I understand the important role of the Council and my own Dublin Fire Brigade and ambulance services. The local council staff and our firefighter paramedics have been an integral part of the local community. They are well respected, they are relied upon, and they provide an enormous level of reassurance to individuals and families in the area they live and work. These past 2 years have been a reminder, if one was needed, on just how essential local government, your council, my council, is to the prosperity of business, to the well-being of our communities, and to the happiness and safety of the individuals and families who live there. This pandemic has challenged our society, our workers, in ways that no public health crisis has ever done before. Today is an opportunity to acknowledge and remember the extraordinary journey we have all endured. We recall the bravery, the compassion, and the selflessness of all who did such heroic work and met that challenge. However, today we particularly remember those who lost their lives in this horrific disease. There will undoubtedly be challenging times ahead for the Council and our fire service. However, I believe by facing our challenges and embracing that change together, we can do even more to safeguard our communities and make a difference to people's lives. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much to Dennis Keeley of the Dublin Fire Brigade. You're in for a treat now, because we are being joined by Fiadh Fitzpatrick on the uilleann pipes, and Fiadh is a member of, and I was saying to Fiadh, you're going to have to help me with the pronunciation because my Irish is not as good as it should be, and it's been put to shame here today, of na Piaberry uilleann, and she's going to play a tune for us, and that tune is called Táimse ina Chola. And that was Fiadh Fitzpatrick there with Táimse ina Chola. I was just talking to Fiadh before she came on stage, and Fiadh is thinking of becoming a nurse next year, no doubt inspired by the great work, as we know and as we've been talking about today, of the frontline services. Joining us next, we've talked about the hard work that the ambulance service and the doctors and the nurses and the Dublin Fire Brigade have performed, but they have never probably been under the kind of pressure that they were during the pandemic, and they needed support, and that support was there because the civil defence stepped up and came at our hour of need and supported us in our communities all around the country, with ambulances, with logistics, and with all the things that they do with very little attention 365 days a year. But they were busy and they were to the fore of all the care that we received and needed during the pandemic. And joining us now is Fergus Byrne, who is Assistant Chief Officer of the Dublin Civil Defence, and I hope you'll welcome him.
Lord Mayor, distinguished councillors, ladies and gentlemen, and colleagues of Dublin City Council, I have to say I'm honoured to be able to stand here with you today and remember what has happened to our community over the past 2 years. A lot has been said about remembering those that we lost, remembering those that are suffering as a result of COVID, and I just want to echo those sentiments. It's sad, and now that we're coming to a point where we hope COVID is failing into our rearview mirror, we still need to be cautious because COVID is still out there. I just want to talk to you briefly about the work that was done by the voluntary sector around Dublin and around the country, but particularly in the Dublin area. The frontline services are mentioned, and we know that that includes not just the emergency services, but indeed all the services who kept our communities operating and functional and reasonably comfort during lockdown periods. I just want to give you a context of what civil defence is and where the volunteers of Dublin Civil Defence stepped forward during the pandemic. Throughout the year, Dublin Civil Defence will support Dublin City Council in terms of community events. You will often see first aiders, some fire appliances doing fire cover at events, and that's what they do throughout the year. But when the emergency came and COVID became an issue in the country, the volunteers stepped forward when asked to enhance the role and support the role of both Dublin Fire Brigade, the National Ambulance Service, Garda Síochána and the HSE to provide support and services to the community. It's worth bearing in mind that apart from 3 full-time officers in Dublin Civil Defence, 400 of the people in civil defence are full-time volunteers. So in other words, they have family lives, they've work lives, and yet when the button was pushed, the volunteers stepped forward without hesitation to put themselves potentially in harm's way, as did so many others, to look after our community during the pandemic. Again, to say that they put themselves onto ambulances, onto transport vehicles to take symptomatic COVID cases for testing for the vulnerable community, to take people who are confirmed COVID for vaccinations, and to look after and care for those during that period. It's also worth bearing in mind that these volunteers have families. And although our full-time professional medics and firefighters provided an absolutely fantastic service during the community, the volunteers had to do their full-time job and leave their families to go out and look after our community during the COVID pandemic. Some of the roles that were taken on by the volunteers included transporting, as I said, symptomatic patients who were being taken for testing. And again, it was mentioned earlier with the Lord Mayor having to wear that PPE for the full day, which proves problematic and uncomfortable. Again, in the early stages of the pandemic, they were operating without vaccination because they were not available at the time. They didn't hesitate, they didn't falter, they carried on the function. When we did get the vaccines arranged and the volunteers were in a position to deal with that on an ongoing basis, they carried on that role. as well as dealing with COVID emergencies and transports, they were also dealing with the ongoing supports that civil defence around the country provide in terms of missing person searches and other roles that they would do on an ongoing basis. While dealing with COVID, and as I said, hopefully we're looking at COVID through the rear-view mirror now, the volunteers had just gotten back to a position where they were dealing with the regular role of volunteers in civil defence, beginning to engage with community events once again. And as last week, we're all aware of the tragic situation in Ukraine, and Ireland, being the nation that we are, we're welcoming those refugees who had to travel from the Ukraine to avoid the war-torn country. The volunteers in Dublin Civil Defence since last Wednesday have activated and established 4 rest centres for those people arriving in the country. And again, without hesitation, over the long bank holiday weekend, we're to the fore and looking after those people, and continue to do so as we speak here today. I suppose I just want to get the point across that the volunteers and the Office of Dublin Civil Defence are an integral part of Dublin City Council. Their primary role is to support the full-time services of the Fire Brigade, the Garda Síochána and the National Ambulance Service, as well as looking after community events throughout the year. So I'd just like to thank those volunteers, to thank their families, and again to thank Dublin Fire Brigade, and particularly the Chief Fire Officer and the Senior Officer of Dublin Fire Brigade, for the support that they provide to civil defence throughout the year, and again particularly during the pandemic. The synergy that developed between the services just goes to show how well the two services can operate. So if you wouldn't mind, on our behalf, just a quick round of applause for the volunteers of civil defence and all the voluntary services who put themselves forward. Thank you very, very much.
And I'd just like to say thank you to Fergus there. And Fergus is formerly of the DFB parish, and there are very strong links between the civil defence and indeed the Dublin Fire Brigade. Closing today's ceremony, we are very lucky to have the Continuum Choir. These are members of the Pro-Cathedral Palestrina Choir who have graduated on and become the Continuum Choir. And they're joining us here with a beautiful piece. And I was just speaking to their musical director, Blanett Murphy, beforehand. The words from this piece were taken off the wall, scrawled on a wall in a concentration camp. And it is called Even When He Is Silent. And we're delighted to be joined by them now. Going around in the crowd, you will see Meehan, who is one of the organisers for Dublin City Council of today's event, with scrolls. And within them is Paula Meehan's poem, which you would have heard earlier, The Light Returning, as a memento of what I think you will agree has been a really beautiful day. And I would like to present one to Alison, Gilliland, our Lord Mayor, who has joined us here today, and we were delighted to have her. Lord Mayor, this is a commemorative poem for you for today, and thank you very much for speaking to us. But we're going to leave you with the beautiful voices of the Continuum Choir. Thank you all so much for joining us here today for what I think you will agree has been a very moving event, made all the more so by your presence. Thank you very much. The Continuum Choir. how remarkably beautiful and haunting that was, guys. That was absolutely fabulous, beautiful piece. And I've never heard it before, but as Blonded was saying, it is written in a time of the worst of times, the darkest of times, and it's about hope and about that we can still love even in the worst of times. Thank you so much. And you're all so young, to the Continuum Choir for that beautiful, beautiful singing. Thank you so much. That draws to a close today's ceremony on behalf of Dublin City Council for National Remembrance Day for COVID-19. My sincere thanks to our Lord Mayor, Alison Gilliland, and to all of you and the councillors, to Owen Keegan, to all of you who are here today. It has been a beautiful and I think fitting and moving event. If COVID showed us anything, I think it showed us that even in our darkest times, we are a remarkable people. And I think Dublin did really well as a city, but Ireland as a country, we've one of the lowest death rates, and it is obviously a tragedy that anyone died here from COVID-19, but 6,500 people died. We had 1/10 of the death rate of our nearest neighbour, and that says something about us as a people, how we pulled together, and I think it says only good things. Thank you all so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and enjoy the rest of National Remembrance Day for COVID-19.